All right, we got all sorts of news all over the place. Glad you're with us. Any press conferences that occur as it relates to Michael Cohen's plea with the federal prosecutors in the Southern District of New York? He has pled guilty to 8 specific issues. The same with Paul Manafort. He's been found guilty in his trial of 8 of the 18 charges against him. In the Manafort case, 5 specific tax fraud charges, 5 specific tax years, false reports, guilty on 1 charge of hiding a foreign bank account, and guilty on 2 counts of bank fraud. I assume that's all related to applications for loans, I believe, that he didn't even receive. In the case of Manafort, we'll stay there for a second. We do know that Judge Ellis will decide what his sentence happens to be. We do know in the case of Michael Cohen that he is facing a particularly long period of time in jail, anywhere between 3 and 5 years. Joining us now is former prosecutor himself, is Joe diGenova. David Schoen and Greg Jarrett stay with us as well. Joe will bring you into all of this. 8 of 18, and Michael Cohen pleads guilty and makes a deal with the prosecutors in the Southern District of New York. Your reaction?
Well, I think if you're Bob Mueller, you're pleased with a verdict which has 8 guilty verdicts in it. That's why they charge so many, to give the jury choices. And while some people may think this is bad news for Mueller, et cetera, it isn't. He got a conviction. He got a conviction in something totally unrelated to collusion. So in that sense, it is a defeat. But this is pretty ugly stuff. I feel very sorry for Manafort. I think the way he's been treated has been horrific. And I just think that this is an ugly place to be, but it is a win for Mueller, as much as I hate to say it. But it's not perfect, and of course, most importantly, it has nothing to do with collusion.
Let me go to the one thing that I know everybody in the media seems to be focused on, that in counts 7 and 8 in the Michael Cohen case, he says he violated campaign laws at the direction of the candidate. Now, for example, in count 8, as it relates to Stormy Daniels, count 7, as it relates to Karen McDougal, I know he's on record. There's a number of places where he has said it, a number of people he said it to. Vanity Fair is but one source. Cohen said that Trump did not know that he paid off Stormy Daniels, and for his own reasons, he said the payment was made with no expectation of getting reimbursed. Now, on the issue when the media is saying, well, this implicates the president, how credible, if somebody said one thing before and is saying one thing now in a plea deal, how credible is the conflicting statements in that case?
Well, obviously, when, are you lying now or were you lying then? And the issue is payments made with the knowledge of the candidate are not necessarily illegal per se, so it's going to require some additional proof and evidence about what this all means. And those charges are usually handled civilly, but in this case, they have not been. And so this needs to be fleshed out.
Yeah. What's your take on that specific issue, David Cohen?
Absolutely. It's going to be, the sexy issue the media plays up. By the way, that's why this deal was billed as a no cooperation deal. This is Cohen's payment to them. This is what I said before. You have to follow the plea colloquy. By putting the president into this, or trying to, this is his cooperation. That's what they wanted. Here's the great irony. The only campaign-related charge so far to date is brought by the Southern District of New York.
Well, it was in fairness, though. This was Mueller feeding it to them.
That's right. But that's the problem. There was absolutely no, it highlights again, no need for Mueller or the appointment of a special counsel, the abuse of that appointment, and the waste of it. But look, this is going to be the issue that plays out. By the way, I thought that was the easiest charge to defend. The idea, as Judge diGenova just said, usually handled by the Federal Election Commission, putting that aside, the idea that Mr. Trump paid these people solely or even primarily to affect the election, unfortunately, there is a history of illicit affairs and that sort of thing, not just with this president.
Well, didn't this all get taken to court in the case of John Edwards? Isn't that similar?
Of course, it happens day after day with elected officials and other people, and the payment to those people to stop further embarrassment is how business is done, frankly, among many lawyers in that business, and to the great satisfaction, by the way, of the so-called victim. Now here, Michael Cohen tries to tie it to the campaign. You're right. He's on record saying otherwise.
And let me ask about that, on record saying otherwise. Even his attorney, David Schwartz, was on fake news CNN March 28th and said that the president did not know about the hush agreement Cohen pushed with Stormy Daniels and the agreement that he made in October 2016. Quote, the president was not aware of the agreement. What is your reaction to that? Is Greg Jarrett, are you there?
Yeah. This will be a question of fact. The president's position has been quite clear. He didn't know about it, and he relied on his personal attorney to handle all matters regarding non-disclosure agreements, which are as common as the grass is green. And whether or not that's a campaign violation will be a question of fact. And, Cohen has a diminished credibility now because of his guilty plea to crimes. So, I wouldn't trust Michael Cohen over the president at any point in time.
Well, let me ask big picture. So in this case, it's Michael Cohen. It's mostly tax on bank issues. Joe diGenova. In the case of Michael Flynn, it's lying to the FBI. In case of Papadopoulos, it's lying to the FBI. In the case of Manafort, if we look at the specific verdicts, again, 10 cases where we had a hung jury that couldn't decide, but 5 specific tax years where he filed false income tax reports, 1 charge of hiding a foreign bank account, 2 guilty counts of bank fraud. You know what I'm not hearing here? Anything about Russia, anything about collusion, anything about the campaign or Donald Trump, really, except that there's a conflicting statements as it relates to whether he knew about what Michael Cohen did or didn't know, and Michael Cohen has said both things on that particular issue.
I don't think there's any doubt that this has nothing to do with the original reason this entire investigation was set up, which is Russian collusion. So that's obviously clear. As far as the counts with regard to the campaign contributions, that's a question that's going to have to be resolved by the prosecutors about whether or not they believe.
All right, guys, hang in there. I'm sorry, we're going to keep you guys for the rest of the hour. We have Paul Manafort, his attorney.
Very long and hard-fought deliberations. He is evaluating all of his options at this point. Thank you, everyone.
That was a statement from Manafort's attorney. Sorry, I didn't even get to hear most of it, but what's your reaction to... Let's go back to the big picture here. No Russia, no collusion, no Trump, no campaign. And I know everybody thinks, well, all right, these are all people. Would any of these people be in any trouble at all if they didn't bring up a special counsel to investigate so-called Russian collusion? Joe diGenova.
So the answer to that is no. In fact, in the case of Manafort, the original tax case against him was declined by the tax division of the Justice Department. They said there wasn't enough evidence. It just goes to show that when you throw resources at something where the prosecutor has only one case and one thing to do, that they can find anything on anybody at any time. That is the misery for Mr. Manafort, to know that he had originally been told by the Justice Department a couple of years ago that there was nothing to this, and then Mueller decided to resurrect it, investigate it to death with millions of dollars, and he found something.
Well, let me ask something, and this goes to the heart of Greg's book. I mean, Hillary Clinton, I don't think there's a greater, more obvious case of obstruction with her subpoenaed emails deleted and acid washed and bleach pit and devices busted up and SIM cards removed. They wrote an exoneration before investigation. We do have a lot of corruption. All right, hang on. I hate to do this to you, but we now have, I guess this is outside of New York. Are these the prosecutors or the defense? Do you know? Let's listen in.
Let's move over to that press conference now. Our courthouse split screen day.
The attorney for the United States in this matter.
This is the Southern District of New York prosecutor.
Bill Sweeney, Assistant Director in Charge of the New York Field Office of the FBI, and James Robnett, who is the Supervisory Agent in Charge of the New York Office of the IRS. Also with me are the prosecutors from the United States Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York who prosecuted the Cohen matter. I'm going to have a brief statement and will not be taking any questions. Today, as you heard, Michael Cohen pled guilty to 8 felony charges. 5 of those dealt with tax evasion for the years 2012 through 2016, in which he failed to report approximately $4.1 million in reported income. Approximately 2.5 of that money was from interest payments from a personal loan that he failed to report. Approximately $1.3 million of that money was from the operation of his taxi medallion business. Approximately $100,000 of that money was from brokerage commissions, and over $200,000 was from consulting fees. That's over $4.3 million over a 5-year period, which translates into a loss to the United States Treasury of approximately $1.3 million. In addition, in count 6, Mr. Cohen pled guilty to making false statements to a financial institution in connection with an application for a home equity line of credit. In that application, he failed to disclose more than $14 million in debt that he had, and as a result of that concealment, he obtained that $500,000 line of credit, which he would not have been entitled to had he been candid and honest. In addition, Mr. Cohen pled guilty to 2 campaign finance charges, one for causing an unlawful corporate contribution, and a second one for personally making an excessive personal contribution, both for the purpose of influencing the 2016 election. In addition, what he did was he worked to pay money to silence 2 women who had information that he believed would be detrimental to the 2016 campaign and to the candidate and the campaign. In addition, Mr. Cohen sought reimbursement for that money by submitting invoices to the candidate's company, which were untrue and false. They indicated that the reimbursement was for services rendered for the year 2017, when in fact those invoices were a sham. He provided no legal services for the year 2017, and it was simply a means to obtain reimbursement for the unlawful campaign contribution. A couple of points I'd like to make. First, these are very serious charges and reflect a pattern of lies and dishonesty over an extended period of time. They are significant in their own rights. They are particularly significant when done by a lawyer who, through training and tradition, understands...
This is a prosecutor in the Southern District of New York talking about the Michael Cohen case. We're not going to our first break. We're going to continue to hold this, and then we'll continue with Joe diGenova, Greg Jarrett, and David Schoen. Straight ahead.
Understands what it means to be a lawyer, to engage in honest and fair dealing and adherence to the law. Mr. Cohen disregarded that training, disregarded that tradition, and decided that he was above the law, and for that he was going to pay a very, very serious price. With respect to the campaign finance violations, the campaign finance laws are designed to prevent the use of illegal money in elections and to maintain the integrity of those elections. Mr. Cohen made guilty pleas for those campaign violations, and those are core violations. And what he did was these pleas remind us that it is illegal for corporations to make contributions to candidates, and it is illegal to make contributions in excess of the amount that Congress set for individuals. That is a strong message today, and we will not fear of prosecuting additional campaign finance cases. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, this case is unique in many ways. Just witness the gathering of all of you here today. And in other ways, it's unique as well. But in the really important ways, this case is not unlike many cases that my office, the United States Attorney's Office, brings, that the entire Department of Justice brings, and that the law enforcement agencies do as well, including the FBI and the IRS. This case has more in common with all those cases because they all share the same message. And that message is that the rule of law applies, and that for law enforcement, all of whom are gathered here, it is our commitment that we will pursue and vindicate those who choose to break the law, and vindicate the majority of people who live law-abiding lives, who follow honest and fair dealing, and live lives of lawful behavior. The message is that we are here, prosecutors are here, law enforcement is here, the Department of Justice is here, the law enforcement agencies here. We are a nation of laws, and the essence of this case is about is justice, and that is an equal playing field for all persons in the eyes of the law, and that is a lesson that Mr. Cohen learned today, and it is a very harsh one for him. Thank you very much.
Who is the candidate you're talking about?
I'm sorry. One other thing. I'm sorry. I'd also like to introduce, my fault. I really want to thank Mr. Sweeney and James Robnett of the FBI and the IRS and the agents who work for them. We do many, many cases with them, and their determination and their fair dealing and their vigor with which they pursue their cases is really inspirational. To the prosecutors in my office, I cannot express the gratitude for the hard work that they did in this case, and that is Assistant United States Attorneys Andrea Griswold and Nick Roos and Rachel Maiman and Tom McKay, as well as Ed Discant, the Deputy Chief of the Public Corruption Unit, and Russell Capone, the Chief of the Public Corruption Unit. For all of these people, I could go on and on about their many virtues and talents, but the one important thing is they all are satisfied with simply being known as public servants, prosecutors, and law enforcement agents who are doing their job. Thank you very much.
All right, let's get reaction now. That was the prosecutor in the Michael Cohen case. Joe diGenova, we'll start with you. Your reaction.
Well, this creates a number of rather complicated problems for the president and other people around him. They are claiming that Michael Cohen told them that these payments, which they say were illegal corporate campaign contributions, were made with the knowledge of the payment of the candidate. Now, we're going to assume that candidate has got to be Donald Trump. Now, he can have knowledge that the payments were being made, but he doesn't necessarily know that they were illegal campaign corporate payments. So it leaves a lot to the imagination, but clearly this has opened a very serious door. And if I read correctly what they are saying, let
me read from Vanity Fair. Michael Cohen says Trump did not know that he paid off Daniels, and for his own reason, Cohen says he made the payment with no expectation of ever getting reimbursed. I mean, and there are numerous cases where he's told that to people. What does that mean?
Exactly. So they're going to have to deal with the questions of Mr. Cohen's credibility on all of these things directly related to any of these payments. So obviously, this matter has very many edges to it.
Let me get Greg Jarrett's take on that.
Well, under the Federal Campaign Election Act, it's very unique. It requires what most statutes don't require, and that's knowledge that you're violating the Federal Campaign Election Act. And Trump's position is that Cohen acted all on his own, that there was some general
at one
discussion.
Point it was Michael Cohen's position.
Yes, that's what I meant. It's Michael Cohen's position that he acted all on his own. It's also the president's position that he acted all on his own. So you can't impute knowledge to somebody who's not a party to it. So that would be principally the president's defense of any accusation that he was involved in directing and coordinating this.
Let me get David Schoen's take on it.
Joe diGenova accurately said a lot of this is going to come down to credibility. I think the prosecutor gave you a head start today. Prosecutor's words, lead prosecutor's words. Michael Cohen has a pattern of lies and dishonesty over a significant period of time. That's the government's position, who in any trial would be vouching for Michael Cohen. Greg is right about the intent required. And again, I said this from the start. The irony is, with many business people, when there's a history of paying for silence to avoid embarrassment, that in itself is a reason, a legitimate business reason.
Well, that's the whole case of John Edwards, as I understood it.
That's right. It has nothing to do with campaign finance. And the idea here, Cohen submitted what he says are false invoices to the Trump organization. Do you think the Trump organization gets one or two invoices a year, or do you think there are a lot? Do you think the president okays every one of them? Do you think the president thought that his election would turn on whether the public believed he was faithful at all times in his marriage or had an affair with Stormy Daniels or Karen McDougal? hard to believe that's what the American people would have voted on one way or the other.
What about what the prosecutor said here about Michael Cohen having lied over this long period of time, Joe?
Well, that, of course, underscores the credibility problem that Michael Cohen is going to have, and it may be that it also may give some pause to the prosecutors themselves about his usefulness to them as a witness. It is quite clear that they have labeled him a liar, and they didn't hesitate to do so. Indeed, they were quite blunt about it. So in terms of him being a witness in anything, again, it remains to be seen.
You know, as we go through all of this, though, I keep going back to one fundamental thing. This was supposed to be about Trump-Russia collusion. Now we're dealing in each case with either lying to the FBI, Flynn, Papadopoulos, or Cohen and Manafort. And again, 10 of the 18 charges they couldn't decide on, and we had a hung jury on 10 of them. But it all comes down to bank fraud, some type of tax issue fraud, and in the case of 2 of the counts with Cohen, payments that he made, and again in interviews he had said that he made on his own devices without telling the president, and then false reimbursement that he made to I guess the campaign or to the Trump organization. So to me, I keep going back to fundamentally, how did we get from one thing to this? And would any of this have happened? Greg, this is your last shot, but we're going to let you go. We're going to keep Joe, and Andy McCarthy joins us.
Well, it just shows you the two-tiered system of justice. Hillary Clinton engages in rampant acts of corruption and illegality and gets a free pass. But if you're Donald Trump, people like Bob Mueller and his team of partisans will go after you with a vengeance, and they will use the unlimited power and resources of the federal government to do it, even though his appointment, as I've pointed out in the book, was illegitimate to begin with. This has always been an investigation in search of a crime.
This terrible death of Molly Tibbetts, we're now learning, by the way, a person illegally in the country is suspected and charged with the murder in her sad death. We'll have Joe diGenova stay with us, and Andy McCarthy. Thank you both, David and Greg.